Alright, so when in doubt, I think we should keep it as simple as possible, right? Because there's plenty of ways we could, add a whole bunch of bells and whistles, but, when I'm in doubt, I want to keep it as simple as possible. And then I thought about it, and let's say we have, our keyboard event listener and we have our mouse event listener. They could still share the same global event object, right? Because one of those listeners is going to be changing mouse properties of the global event, and then another one of those listeners is going to be changing keyboard properties of the event, and so they are both accessing the same variable, the same container, but they're accessing different properties of that container, so they're not going to step on each other's feet. That seems like the best way to do it. Now, if we were doing something in a multi-threaded language, you might run across some problems by, sharing the same object, right? Because you have, it's possible that your event listeners for keyboard and mouse are on two different threads, and then you're accessing this global event object that's on another thread, and a whole bunch of weird, bad things could happen. But we're doing this in JavaScript, and I get that, and I do want to bring this over to C, but my current C code base, I'm not doing multi-threading because, oh my, just so many weird things happen when you multi-thread that it's like, it's not worth it. I'm just going to, it's worth it, don't get me wrong, but I just think it's better to keep it simple, do it single-threaded, get it working, and get something amazing working before you even worry about multi-threading because of all the weird headaches that are going to happen. And then keep in the back of your mind that, I want to multi-thread, so maybe make some concessions for that, but I'm not going to make any concessions for multi-threading in this JavaScript code base. So, with all that thought about how I need to put things together, let's take this constructor here for the global event object, and we're going to keep it dead simple, like right in the global data object that's getting returned. We're just going to go over here and we're just going to call this global event, and we will assign it to a new global event object, right? So I'm kind of using this variable kind of like everywhere, right? So no need to come up with new variable names after we've kind of thought really hard about them, right? Because now we know that this variable name has a very specific meaning, everywhere we see it. You could do something like this where, like, you could be like this, but you don't really want this, because now you have this token and this token that actually have the exact same meaning. And if they have the exact same meaning, you really should have the exact same spelling. It's kind of like if you've read clean code, there's a concept of one name per concept, I believe is what they called it, one name per concept. So for example, if you use get and put, you would not want to use the word set anywhere in your code, right? If you have if you're using the word load for load data, then maybe you don't want to use the word fetch also in your code base, right? Because then you don't want to have to guess, okay, did I call that function load data or did I call it fetch data? Unless you have a very specific reason of why, like, load and fetch are like these two things that must be differentiated because they're so specific. You only want to be as you don't want to add any extra mental search space to your variable names, You want them as detailed as they need to be and no more detailed than that, because then you're just adding extra noise to your code. Alright, so our global event object is in the global data object so that we have a way to globally access keyboard and mouse events. Right now, there is no keyboard stuff in this global event, right? It's just mouse stuff. So we'll worry about we'll probably actually the first thing I wanted to do is keyboard stuff. So we'll probably have to add some keyboard stuff to it right now. Let's refresh this. That's still working. We didn't break it. Let's go back here. In this global event, I'm gonna kind of like make some partitions here, so I know like what sections are what, because right now it's kind of like this is mouse. So I'm gonna write M for mouse right here, and then that miscellaneous stuff, the current and the type, I should probably put those together as well. They kind of logically, this kind of logically seems like it should go here. Current slash, actually, I'm not sure I like that. I'm not sure I have a use for that. I kind of have a vague idea what I would use it for. Like there's almost like a, like, is it a keyboard? Is it a keyboard event, or is it a, actually, I'm gonna do something like this, subtype. Does that make sense? You know what? Just gonna make a note here because I don't know if I should implement subtype. For example, mouse. So, you know, I have a thought of, you know, having a subtype where we know if it's, if this object currently represents a mouse event or a keyboard event. But if you have, like, a keyboard event handler and a mouse event handler, why would you need to know that subtype? So I think that might just be a little bit of extra detail that's just not needed. So I'm just going to make a note here that, oh, I'm kind of thinking about that, but, you know, maybe hold off on that for now. We're going to have a section here. We're going to put it out, a little detail here. M for mouse event stuff. And then we'll make another section for keyboard event stuff. And we'll just have key, and then it's going to be a string. And what key was pressed. Actually, I guess technically that should be an empty string, what key was pressed. And we'll do like the, if we have the mouse down and mouse up, we can do key down. Is key currently down? And then key up. Is key currently up? Currently down, currently up. Right, so something like this, the A key, and it's down, right? And then when somebody releases the A key, it would say A, and then you get like a 1, kind of like that. That's kind of the thought there. And then we will... now, obviously, because I've coded it with, instead of using a key code, I'm just using a string for, like, an actual letter. That could be a problem if we have, like, control or whatever, like a control key. But we could have key A, whatever, blah, 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 and then, like, if it's control, it could be, like, CTRL, like that. But then control usually is thought of as a modifier, so that's usually a separate variable. But you know what? I think we're getting ahead of ourselves. We'll just use it this way because it's pretty straightforward. And we won't, as we're coding this keyboard event listener, we're not going to worry about control keys and modifiers. You know, we can worry about that later. For now, we just want, really I would like some arrow keys, so like up, down, left, right. So I'm going to like write in here, like if it's the up arrow, down arrow, whatever, I'll just have like this, like up as a string, you know. If It's the down arrow. I can do down like that, you know, left, and then right, kind of like that. I'll probably abbreviate it, so I'll probably do something like right like this, and then left like that, and then sometimes because I'm OCD, instead of up like that, I'll probably write it like this, and then down, I'll probably write down like this, or like this, or maybe like this. I don't know. Maybe support them all. I don't know, but you get the idea of kind of like how I'm going to do that. Let's make sure I haven't broken anything. Okay, so that looks good. Alright, so how are we going to add an event listener to the canvas, and how is it going to be inside of an object? I did say that we're going to have a user input adapter, so we should probably get on writing that. I'm going to write a little stub right here, right now. So function user input adapter class. So there's different ways to write object-oriented JavaScript, and this way I don't see many people do very often, or at least when you look it up how to do it, you don't see it done this way. I usually see people using like object create. I like to use functions as objects. I don't know, I guess well, just remember that this is like the outer container. This function scope here is literally the outer container of this user input class, if that makes sense. And JavaScript doesn't really have classes, but that's the way you should be thinking about it. That's the way I've written it. Before we write any detail for that class, though, I actually want to, for this global data section, I just want to mark this off as just want to have a, because this might get pretty long eventually. It's starting to get long. I want to just have this line made out of G's and D's to just highlight the bounds of that section, so I can, you know, see it a little bit better. And then I'll just go GD global data. Okay, and then we can. Sometimes when I want to be really specific, I will do something like this below. So the global data object is below, and then we'll take this right here, and we'll go down to the bottom here, and then we'll just write above. So now we kind of know that the region for this global data code is, you know, right here, and if we double click really quick, we can kind of like get that highlighting so we can scroll through and see the bounds really quick. Okay, so our input adapter class, what is the purpose of this? So we have one of them, just one instance, so it's like a singleton. Do I really want to do that? User input adapter, you know, singleton. Do I want to call it singleton class or just singleton? User input adapter singleton. I'll just call it that because there's only going to be one instance of it. All right. What's the first thing we can do to just get something working right away? So one thing I realize is this either needs a canvas or the canvas adapter, right? Because it's going to attach some event listeners to the canvas for that user input. And what would make more sense? Do we want to use the canvas adapter, or do we want to use the canvas itself? Well, this is already an adapter, right? So it's already a piece of code that's going to shield us from the JavaScript specific canvas stuff. Yeah, so if we gave this a canvas adapter as an input, then we kind of have like adapter logic on top of an adapter logic, and that kind of doesn't make sense to me. And sometimes you got to be careful, because when you try to encapsulate things, you end up encapsulating the encapsulator and then encapsulating that, and it's like, when does the chain of encapsulation stop? And also, another thought is the order at which I created the input adapter and the order at which I created the canvas adapter, those could have been done in any order. They could have been coded in any order. So if I supply the canvas adapter here, that's really just an artifact that's a coincidence of the order I wrote the code in. And does that make any sense? That doesn't make sense. You want things to be a little bit more intentional than, oh, well, coincidentally, I just happened to write that other piece of code first. So I would say this needs to take just a canvas object. HTML5 canvas. Now there could be some other things that it needs to take, but I believe the canvas, also can have the keyboard events wired up to it. So I think all it needs is the canvas, and then we'll just have a little input check here, if not canvas, and then throw, and then null canvas, and then we'll just put the name here in that error message. And you don't have to be super specific with your error messages. You have to be specific enough to where this is a unique string that you can find in the codebase, but really the only purpose of an error message should, as far as I'm concerned, just be some type of unique identifier that I can find in the codebase. The reason for that being, well, what's the purpose of an error message? And the purpose of the error message is so that a human programmer like me can go find where that error is happening and fix the problem, right? So it really does not matter what this error message is, as long as I, as the programmer, can find it. So we could call it something like we could call it error 2020 0508 for the current date, and then we could call it, okay, it's 3:03 p.m. right now, 3:03 p.m. Put a leading 0 there. Right, we could call it this. And that's a pretty unique string. Like, I don't think I'm going to program another error message this minute of this day of this year. So that's perfectly fine as far as I'm concerned, because sure, you're not going to understand what the hell that means, but then you're going to go find where the error is being emitted in the source code, and then it's going to be obvious to you that, oh yeah, so a null canvas object got supplied, and then you're going to fix it, right? So just never lose focus of, like, what is the code actually for? Because, you see a lot of, like, .NET framework or whatever, they have all these error categories, and, like, I believe, like, there's an error base class, and then you can derive from that, and it just gets really complicated really quick, and sometimes I feel like it's a little bit too granular. As far as coding in, like, C# and Java, really you just need to know whose fault it is. Is it is it the programmer's fault for this problem? Like, is there actually a problem in, like, the algorithm that is that why we're detecting the problem, or is it because is it an error, like an I/O error where someone unplugged a peripheral, right? If someone unplugs a peripheral and it causes an error because somebody unplugged a CD drive or something, or a USB port, that's more of an error that you want to recover from because it was outside of the program's control, right? So you want to differentiate between this type of error is outside of the program's control, and this type of error is means it's the programmer's fault, and something in the code definitely needs to be changed. Like, you need more of that kind of granularity of categories of error. You don't need to get into too much specifics. You just want to know, generally, how should you recover from it? You know, is it a fatal error where you should... Is it a fatal error where you need to crash, or is it like an error where you need to try to keep on going? If that makes sense. All right. Anyways, I'm gonna stop recording and re-record.